Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, thank you very much for joining us on this session here at the summit, finally on its last day. It has been very productive, and we want to now end on a high note, joined by Their Excellencies, Prime Minister of Serbia, Đuro Macut, and Her Excellency, Prime Minister of Latvia, Evika, Siliņa. Thank you very much for joining us on this session. And if you allow me, Prime Minister, I would start with Prime Minister Siliņa. The title of this session is Reforms and Results, How Do Nations Rise? The Baltics is an extremely interesting example because you're a country, Latvia, that ends the Second World War, ends up in a sphere of Soviet influence. Then you say you regain your independence, you join the European Union, and now you sit at a table of a bloc of 500 million people. So my question to you is, how do nations rise?
Yes, it's actually my everyday question. How do I make my nation prosperous and how do I make it to rise? So I believe in a country like mine, three things are very important. It's speed, technologies, and resilient people. Without those three things, I don't believe in today's world any country can succeed. And especially in Europe, I believe we as Europeans, we need to work like a Swiss clock. So not just to work together, but to be very precise on what we really want to achieve.
And can I just ask you as a follow-up, if you had not joined the European Union, would your nation be where it is today? Is that a key instrumental part of it, joining a bloc?
Yes, definitely. I think our country has grown so much on our GDP since we joined Europe, and we are as well 20 years European partners, we are NATO partners. We have done so much in our independence, and we are now, for example, spending 5% of our GDP to our security. Could we do it without Europe? I don't think so. Europe gives us united trade. Europe gives us opportunities to grow. Europe gives us prosperity perspectives. So I think so many things has grown in Latvia just because we have a united market in Europe as well.
Well, thank you for that. And Prime Minister Macut, your country, Serbia, is also a candidate country to join the European Union. I wonder from your perspective, however, how do you see this past 30 years? And the same question to you, how does a nation rise in this very difficult geopolitical scenario?
Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And I'm just listening very carefully to my colleague, Prime Minister. And well, we have some similarities, but also differences. We are at the same time, let's say, became for the second time independent, although we have a very long, independence in row. But from, let's say, 1999, from that period, we have dramatically change in our, let's say, economy, in our constitutional organization, and in our way how to go on with the economy, firstly. So we are not the member of the EU, we are on the row, we are neutral, we are not the member of the NATO. So these are the two maybe problematic issues comparison to you, but on some way we are on the way and approaching very quickly to the requests that we want to in these spheres that we already mentioned. So our growth is really steadily increasing, but this is the political decision and the action in the country related to the development, let's say, frame that we put about 10 years ago. And you've heard from our previous Prime Minister what is the key issue with Serbia.
And when it comes to Serbia, it's a very particular country, it's a very interesting country, but as you noted, you're not a member of NATO, you're not a member of the European Union at this stage. I wonder if you're optimistic, and perhaps it's the way to put it, that this membership will happen because the road has really stalled. But can you navigate a world in which you are not fully a bloc and you're not fully in any particular alliance? Is that an issue now, or is it a flexibility that ultimately helps you?
I think it's the second thing. So it's the flexibility. So although we are not a member of this group, we are approaching, and we are the candidate. We are in the Western Balkans group of the countries that are approaching. So we have something that we are fulfilling the technical issues very quickly, but political issue is on the side of the European Union to give us the green light to come to the position of accepting our membership application. So we are not losing time. This is the point. We are not losing the time, and we are going on with the reforms, and we are showing results. This is the most important issue. Not waiting, going on, and we are waiting for the political decision.
And since I just want to move on this topic, but the European Union will say the progress is not happening because you're not moving fast enough. They point to issues that are very specific to you. They also say they would have loved to see a country like Serbia implement sanctions on countries like Russia to have an alignment on that. Is that going to be a problem, or do you wonder or think ultimately we will converge and this will happen faster than it may seem at this point?
Probably it could be a little bit faster, but I believe that with our, let's say, policy and our strategic partnerships, we are trying to have the partnerships with the diversities, let's say, to stratify that to all sides, to all sides of the world, or let's say sides. So we are also in relations with Russia in the meaning of energy supplies at the moment. We are now diversification plans for other supplies, and this is the key issue for energy in Europe at the moment. So I think in that way we have to remain, but we have to switch on to another approach.
Prime Minister.
Like, for example, Latvia and Baltic states are now absolutely independent from Russia's energy as we used to be. We are diversifying our energy sources. We are now connected with Europe. Sure, without Europe, it would not be so easy for us. But we are the ones who are running very fast of setting values about how we can be more resilient as well as Europe. And for Latvia, it was very important that not just because of independence to get rid of dependency of only one supplier of gas, but in today's world we need to provide cheaper energy sources for our industries to get cheaper energy and to be more productive, more competitive in our economies. That's actually a big issue for Europe, and next week we will have a big competitiveness discussion in European level, so I believe we will really be discussing what's the next step, how we can get better prices as well for our consumers. So.
And that was my follow-up question, because ultimately the three of us were Europeans, and for 2 years, a year and a half, we've heard that we're becoming a museum, that either there's radical change or we're going to go into a form of slow agony. That's the word of Mario Draghi. There's days where you wonder, should we even get out of bed? The zeitgeist is just so negative. Is there too much negativity around Europe, or is this a moment where you say it is very complex and it's difficult to stay competitive in this environment?
I think it's always a challenge in this geopolitical world where is so many news on social media which are distracting us, but I'm probably achiever in my life. I want to achieve results. So I see for Europe, this is a good historical moment for a change. We just made an agreement of free trade with Mercosur. We just made an agreement with India, and now upcoming free trade agreement are with United Arab Emirates and the Gulf countries. Because for Europe, this is a good timing to make partners outside Europe, and we were very busy having a good relationship with our transatlantic partners. But now I think this is a good opportunity for Europe as well to shake it off and go forward.
So just as a follow-up on that, in a context where there's a war in Europe, where the relationship certainly with the U.S. is changing fundamentally, and there's a European market that is very powerful, that it's unique in nature, but it's also squeezed by China. Can Europe continue to succeed? That is still the fundamental question that Europeans would like to ask ourselves. Is there a future where we remain relevant, competitive, and big players?
That's probably the task of governors who are now leaders of Europe. And therefore, as I mentioned before, like Latvia, my country, is fully digital. Our public sector is absolutely digital. You can establish a company from here in Latvia. But I believe in Europe, we need more speed. What I mentioned when we started discussion, speed is something where we can succeed in Europe. And therefore, reducing bureaucracy is absolutely important in Europe. Not to lose ourselves in bureaucratic issues, but to take the risk and let our companies develop themselves, go forward with technologies. The second thing probably is private financing. Now we are working on how we can boost up those huge amount of finances which are just lying in accounts of people in Europe. So we need to move this money. We need to help Europeans to invest. As we see, Draghi report says this is a good option for Europe. And sure, those partnerships, bridges with other countries which are open to work with Europe, it can give a big chance for European leaders. And I don't see Europe as a federation, but working together.
It cannot be a federation.
It cannot be, but we need to work in a much, really in a single market, like a temperature.
Well, thank you for that. And Prime Minister, same question to you. We've had a very negative narrative around Europe. There's this idea of a continent that is now in decline, that used to run the world, but will no longer do that. And the question is that it becomes irrelevant almost in big negotiating moments. Yesterday, Abu Dhabi hosted talks between Russia and Ukraine. The Europeans were not at the table. Is there too much negativity, or do you go, yes, this is now a fundamental moment in which we Europeans need to look at ourselves in the mirror also?
Well, I think it's a momentum for Europe to change, to switch thinking. So we have to rethink it. Of course, the European Union is predominating in Europe. We, as non-members of the European Union, we are trying to make our partnerships independently of that. But the key partner with us is European Union. All the export, the 70% of all the export is going to the European Union, definitely. So our first neighbors is European countries, but we have to think a little bit more divergently, to look also to the East. So I name it as Global East and Global South. We don't now have only the Global South as the countries that are not depending only to the groups like the European Union. So I think that we have now a global East that is starting to be a key player, but also we have a huge number of countries that are also present here on this fantastic summit that are belonging to the global South, so the other poles. So we have, let's say, few poles in the world that are now leading with the economies. And Serbia is trying to fulfill the requests of the European Union, but we are the members, let's say, of those globality groups.
And is that why you're here? A very simple question, but is that why you're here? Because you think, yes, we need to reach out to the UAE, we need to reach out to the Gulf, the Middle East, we need to expand the way we see the world?
What is interesting, our relations with the United Arab Emirates are really strong. So we have a very good, partners within the Emirates, and we are building something that is the infrastructure, also the technologies and other resources like in the agriculture, etc. So we are trying to find the partners outside Europe, European soil. So we have different partners on the East, but also on the Middle East, Far East, but also on the South.
And many, I'm sure I'm here in this audience, what was the feedback that you got? Are we interesting to this part of the world?
I had some fantastic discussions with a few presidents and prime ministers of the other parts of the world today, with the president of Paraguay. So I think that we are really thinking on the same way. We have to be resilient, but also flexible. This is the point. So Serbia is really going very quickly in the different ways. The IT is the first one, definitely, but we are also want to implement this to change it into the governance, like the health, then we have educational issues, science is also very important, and agriculture. So these are a few areas besides energy and energy supplies that we are now talking about. So we have to think about our future and to continue to have a steadily rising up growth.
And of course, we have to address the elephant in the room, because the question for Europe, and Russia clearly conditions everything for the European Union, but also Europe overall. We talk about the energy model that is completely gone, the Russian gas that will, in a way, not come back, certainly not in the short time. The war requires massive amount of funding, defense, new contracts. Can Europe really be successful if this war is still going on, ultimately?
I think Europe is the one who actually decided to give Ukraine just recently 90 billion euros for the aid. Europe can make decisions. Europe are the number one donator as well for Ukraine when it's needed. So we could, during 1 year, to have a safe instrument to boost up our defense. And actually before, never we spoke in Europe about security. It was always NATO. Now there is no any session in Europe, any meeting where we are not thinking how we can help Ukraine. Like, I come from the country, I know what I'm gonna do. We are giving 1% of our GDP to Ukraine. So we will never give up something in Europe. I think that's clear. Ukraine is Europe. There is no other chance, as we need to figure out how we can end this war. And therefore, I believe we need to back up Ukrainians in negotiations, because negotiations have started with Russia, US, and Ukraine. And we as Europeans, we as well, we need to be at the table. We need to decide to help Ukraine as much as we can. And that's what we are doing. But we need to move faster, that's true.
So how do we get this seat at the table? Because many Europeans look at this negotiation and they go, the peace in Europe is being negotiated here. And we are not at the table.
That's reality. That's what we are discussing, how to get at the table. So we are actually talking to Ukrainians, we are talking to US, we are not talking now to Russia. That's the issue, what we need to understand, how we will move to the next step. Because still, Ukraine will always need, as a security guarantee, one of the points is to be a member of European Union. So it is an issue for European leaders as well. So the issue is we need to find a way how to discuss those issues, because in any citizen of Europe interest is to end the war.
And you mentioned Ukraine and the European Union. That is still your wish? You believe this is a country that in maybe 1, 2, 3 years can be a member?
Ukraine is, the negotiations with Ukraine has been opened. And I think we really understand we cannot leave Ukraine in a gray zone, because we can see what happens to the countries which are not members of EU, but they stay in a gray zone. They have to manage huge hybrid attacks, cyber attacks, sabotages, and in the end, so they go to the other side of the story. Therefore, for Europe, it's in Europe's interests to have Ukraine integrated, to have Moldova integrated. So I believe there is as well Balkan countries who are now waiting for European answers when we will make a decision. Like from my country, we understand how much does it really mean to make this next step. Because if Latvia or Baltic states, as you started the question, would not be in Europe, I don't know where we would be.
Because Russia is still a threat for Europe.
Sure. Yes.
You'd say it is a threat.
Yes, it is. It is a threat. We have been attacked regularly, hybrid threats, false information, cyber threats. So that's reality where we live. So.
And thank you, Prime Minister. And Prime Minister Macut, the fantastic thing about a forum like this is you get to see very different perspectives of the world, sometimes on the same issue. And one of the things that I've heard multiple times is this idea that Europeans have double standards. They get very agitated by some conflicts, some wars, but not others. They do not treat everyone in the same way. And there's a form of double standard that, especially in this region, resonates and speaks very loudly. Would you say that is fair, or is there something perhaps more nuanced that got lost in translation?
Well, this is the continuity of the previous question. So I can say that, for instance, Serbia started the process 12 years ago, so we are still waiting. So it's not very easy to bring the country to the European Union. So we have a long history of those, let's say, approaching process, and we fulfilled lots of technical issues, but we are waiting for the political ones. So it's quite complicated with the European Union how to decide and when to decide what to go on. And as the Prime Minister said, Western Balkans are in a specific position. We are the most developed country in the region, and we are let's say, the engine of the economy in the region, but we are not recognized politically. And
But do you understand the criticism, perhaps, that some would go, the Europeans do not look at Ukraine and Gaza in the same way? And that's not coherent. Do you understand the criticism, or is there something that perhaps is getting lost in translation?
Well, I think that there are criticisms, of course, and they are probably on the side. But what we are thinking and how do we think is that all those conflicts should stop as soon as possible. So this is the key issue. And we are really looking forward to the Emirates, to the negotiations that are perfectly led by the Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. So we are looking forward on his, let's say, wisdom diplomacy, how to settle down everything and how to stop this really not acceptable type of conflicts in the 21st century. So we are looking forward for stopping as quickly as possible to continue with the economy reforms and with the growth.
Well, thank you for that. And since we're reaching the end of the session, just a very brief final note. One of the goals of a forum like this is to strengthen bilateral ties. For the EU, it's about trade now. So I wonder, Prime Minister, do you believe we'll be here perhaps with a trade deal very soon in the context of the UAE or perhaps the GCC? Is that something that you see happening this year?
Yes, actually, as I mentioned, we have discussions within European leaders that this is a good historical time for Europe to make new partnerships, not new actually, to sign the partnerships, to tighten them and to strengthen them, because now Mercosur, India, there has been discussions with UAE, with the free trade agreement, and I think it's upcoming in the nearest future.
So you believe perhaps this year we could see Ursula von der Leyen landing in this country with a deal that works for the two of them? And I have just a very brief question. The EU used to look at trade as always accompanied with values. Is this a moment where the EU goes, you know what, we have to be more pragmatic. Let's put the values aside because we may not see the world in the same way. Let's focus on business. Is there a much more pragmatic approach? Because to me in India, it seemed obvious that was the new approach. We focus now on business.
Not only on business, we will always share and value values as well. Rule of law, there will be always, and Greenland is Europe. So therefore, values still will matter, but yes, pragmatic way, new partnerships, strengthens what really works, and yes, Europe needs to be stronger. We are 500 million market. Who is not interested to make a deal with us?
Well, on that note, of course, well, thank you very much. We have reached the end of the session. Thank you to the two excellencies, Prime Ministers. Thank you for your time and being so generous. And of course, we continue with this forum. Thank you very much.